Hi everyone, I am Chris. This is Simply Classic, and if you're watching this video, it means you've received your third quarter subscription box. We are so excited to bring you this pattern because it's one I've been wanting to do for a while, so I'm going to show you what it is. It's a hip bag, and this is unlike any other hip bag that you have seen recently. It is a hip bag with a really cool flap on it, and we're going to take a little bit closer look at the bag in just a second. But it's got a really neat twist lock. You open it up and it's got compartments in here. You close it with this flap underneath, and then it has a zipper section in here as well. So I was really excited about doing this bag because the first time I did it was well over 2 years ago, and I made one for myself to go to Italy. I really wanted to have something underneath my clothing and underneath my coat so that I could avoid pickpocketers and all the other things that seem to happen in Europe. And it worked fabulous. It is amazing what you can fit in this bag. So before we get started, I'm going to show you what fit in my bag. I'm going to show you a little bit closer up of the bag, and then we're going to go over what's included in your kit. The first thing I want to do is show you the bag that I made originally. This is a bag that is, I've been using this bag for a long time. It's leather, and it has got, obviously it's two-tone. I've got the strap and the closure as one leather, and then the main part of the bag as the other leather. Right now it's loaded down. And this is a bag you can either wear as a crossbody or you can wear it as a hip bag, either way. So I'm going to just show you, give you a little peek inside and show you what we were able to fit in this. And I say we because if your significant other is like mine, you tend to have things handed to you. Hey, stick this in your bag, stick this in your bag, right? So the first thing here, let me show you the flap. The flap itself opens up by twisting the lock, opening it up, and see then this flap comes down below. And it hooks on in the back, okay? So it's kind of a unique closure. When you flip this up, here's what I fit. My cell phone. I was able to fit my sunglasses, my reading glasses, a little bit of headache medicine, chapstick. I had my driver's license and my my health card. I had a couple of credit cards, and that all fit in this main section. Honestly, I could have fit a few more things in there, which we did during the trip. I just kind of grabbed what I had to show you. In the zipper compartment is where we put our cash. And then I also had our passports, and I had this little passport holder that I made, and our passports were in there. And then also we had the key to the car that we didn't want to lose, so that when we got back to the airport we could get home. So it really held everything that we needed for the trip. And with being such a small bag, it was amazing to me. As the trip went on and we kept putting more and more stuff in here, it just kept fitting. It was almost like it grew with us. So we are going to take a look at what is in your kit. Of course, your kit is with faux leather. And I'm going to give you a little bit closer up view of the bag that you'll be making. So let's take a little bit closer look at the bag. We are going to do the belt strap in this video. So if you would prefer a crossbody strap, you're going to cut the strap out longer, just basically using the whole width of the faux instead of cutting it to measurement. And we're going to use a buckle to attach it. That can be done whether you're doing it as a crossbody or as a belt strap. Either way, the buckle can be used. Then, as I mentioned, we have this zipper pocket, and the zipper pocket is fairly large. You're going to be able to fit quite a bit in there, as I showed you before. Now, this particular bag has got the adhesive lining. However, we're going to be making the bag today, as I mentioned, with linen lining. The flap, if you look at the back, it attaches here on the back, and the way it opens and closes is you just twist the lock, open it this way, and then to close it you just bring it back up. The flap has got a really cool feature here where it's got this little add-on with a twist lock. And then on the inside, we have our credit card slots here against this back section. And then of course it's super roomy for all of the things that I showed you the previous part of the video. So in your kit, you are going to get one roll of faux, and we did give out the geometric this month. So this is the black geometric, or you're going to get this red, or you possibly could get the brown, which is what we're going to be using to construct the bag today. And this is the brown one here. You're also going to be getting some lining, of course a zipper for the zipper pocket. You're going to have a pull to go with your zipper, the roller buckle, the spring gate O-rings, and then of course a twist lock. You're also going to have binding, and the binding is pre-made bias binding regardless of your lining color. Black is used because in my opinion black is the best way to go when doing a binding, because you can use black thread, you can hide it, you don't have to worry about taking it apart. If you miss a spot, you just go back over it, sew it again, and nobody will ever know. So in addition, there's some other things in your kit. And if you are a member of the quarterly subscription box, obviously you're getting the goodies. We hope that you enjoy them each month. And without further ado, we're going to start sewing. Okay, let's go over pattern pieces. Now the first thing we have is a belt strap. And you see I have two pieces here. So what you want to do is you're going to cut the length of the faux, which is usually 55 inches by 4 inches, which is, typical strap. Then what you want to do is you want to just wrap this around your waist if it's going to be a waist bag. And when the two sections meet, right where they meet, you want to add 6 inches and then cut it. And then the extra just put aside. You can use it for some of these other pattern pieces. Then you want to cut 12 inches off that. And that's going to give you 2 separate pieces. Now on both these pieces I drew a line down the center, and I put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side of the line. Okay, so both pieces have that. We'll sew this in just a few minutes. We have 2 back pieces, and our back pieces look like this. Okay, so here's one. The other one, you're going to cut a zipper section out. So on your pattern piece, first of all, I do suggest printing 2 copies of the pattern piece, all the pattern pieces, well, just really the first page, pattern pieces, and go ahead and make your back piece the full piece like this. It's going to be much easier to cut out than to try to cut it on the fold. And then you're going to cut this zipper section out of just one of the back pieces. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that this pattern does not need any stabilizer. It is written for faux or leather or cork. If you want to do it in cotton, you will have to stabilize it. Okay, we also have a front piece, and our front piece looks like this, and we have a main and we have a lining. The lining has woven interfacing on the back. The main, of course, doesn't. No stabilizer in this pattern. Then we have a gusset, and the gusset piece, when you look at it, you have got a dotted line on your piece. You need to cut the lining a little bit shorter than the main gusset piece, okay? So we have 2 pieces here, main and lining. Right? We have a credit card slot piece, and this credit card slot piece is a main and a lining. Now this piece of lining doesn't need any kind of interfacing. It's just going to back this main piece. When you, or if you use adhesive lining, which is really my preferred method with this bag, but I do want to show you how to do it in the cotton, and we certainly provided the cotton in your kit, which is why we're doing it with cotton today. All you're going to have to do is stick this adhesive lining down. We'll have another video once the pattern comes out to show you how to do the adhesive lining method. It is really, it's nice. Then we have 2 zipper pockets, and your zipper pockets are, of course, back with interfacing. Now, this is the main thing that's different between the adhesive lining and the regular lining methods, is that the zipper pocket is done differently. So of course you've got your zipper, you've got your zipper pocket. This is going to be the more traditional method, like we're used to doing zipper pockets. Now we have 3 pieces that we are not going to cut out to perfect measurements until we glue them together. So that is the lower closure. We've got 2 of these, and you see nothing on the back, and they're much bigger than the pattern piece. I say much bigger. I'm going to just cut them a little bit larger. Same thing with the upper closure. Okay, 2 pieces, one's a little larger. And then the same thing with the flap. Okay, so we have 2 pieces. We're going to put some double-sided tape to hold those together, and then we'll trace and cut that out. Now, again, I told you this is written for leather and faux leather, and the reason why is because we actually can edge coat the flap, and we can edge coat these closure pieces if you'd like. You don't have to do that. And actually, if you use leather, you really don't have to do that. Sometimes our faux leather has got a different color on it, and it's nice to use some edge coat and some edge or base coat and edge paint, but of course it's not necessary. You don't have to use that. Okay, so you've got these 3 larger pieces, and we'll show you how to get all those together and get those cut out. That's it. I mean, it's really a great bag, and my testers really liked it because they were able to use a lot of their scrap fabrics and just some webbing or something to get it done, and they came up with some really cute options. So make sure you check out the pattern for inspiration. We're going to start out by doing our straps first. I say straps, strap belt, depending on whether you're making it a crossbody or a belt bag. And you're just going to peel the backing off the double-sided tape and fold the edge, the long edge, just shy of the line. Now we want to make sure we've got a little bit of space between the 2 edges so that we can turn this one more time. Fold this up, and you can see by see how you have a space here, and as you turn this, that fabric takes up that space and it turns easy. You don't get any weird bubbles or any kind of problem with it buckling. So I'm going to put some clips on here. Now this is going to be the shorter of the 2 pieces, and there's really no need to shape either one of these edges. However, if you'd like to do that, you certainly can. I am not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and stitch, and I'm going to stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, as you have seen before, whenever I do any kind of handle or strap, I always like to use my edge guide. Make sure everything stays lined up. And then we're going to repeat down the other long side. And we have this part of the strap completed. So the longer strap, I'm going to do the same thing, but because this is I am going to do a belt, and because this is the outside of the belt, and what I mean by that is it's going to be this edge here. You can choose to shape it like I did here. You can use an edge punch if you'd like. You can keep it straight. It doesn't matter what you do, but you are going to want to stitch around that edge, whether you keep it straight or you do a shape. I like doing the shapes. I think it makes it look a little bit more like a belt. And because I have a buckle, that one edge is going to show more than the others, because the others are going to be folded back and you're going to have clasps and buckles and all that good stuff on there. So just kind of do what you would like. We are going to attach all of our buckles and swivel clasps with rivets, but this can definitely be sewn in lieu of rivets. You don't have to have rivets to get all this together. You can easily stitch in place of rivets. So whenever I do any kind of shaped edge, I'm always going to fold my edges in first, like you see here. Now, make sure when you fold edges, what I'm doing is making sure that this short edge first matches up really nice, and then I'm not pulling the fabric. All I'm doing is laying it up and pushing it down. And when I say pushing it down, I mean pushing it down here, patting it down. Okay, so fold it up and pat it down. Don't pull. If you pull, you're going to be pulling your strap out of proportion, and then it has more of a tendency to twist, and we certainly don't want straps that twist. As I get close to the other edge, I actually will go ahead and fold this edge even with the short edge, and then all I have left to do is this section here. Okay, and I can kind of push that down, spread it out, and if I have a big bubble there or a big section that's not fitting right, I know I've stretched it. And you can see how nice and flat this lays. A lot of times twisting straps start at the table. It's because we're not folding properly. So just kind of be aware of how you're folding your straps. Now on one short edge, I am going to put one more piece of double-sided tape, just a small piece, because when I fold this strap and cut my shape, I want to make sure that shape stays real well and it doesn't get out of whack. So here, I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm not really sure the right word, but I'm just going to put a little piece here. I'm going to fold this over. Okay, and now this edge here is staying without any clips, and when I go to punch that, it's going to have a tendency to stay in place. Where if I just used a clip without anything here holding that down, when I go to punch it, it has a better chance of getting distorted. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip. The other side of this long strap, I'm not going to worry about shaping. Not worried about it at all. It's going to be folded under, behind some kind of clip, clasp, something. So I'm not really concerned about that. But you see how that is kind of bubbling out. It's not laying real flat. This side is laying a lot flatter. And it's because I have that double-sided tape in there. So I'm going to take this over to my cutting table, and I'm just going to use an end punch and go ahead and punch a shape in this edge just to give it a little bit of character. So I have my shape punched in, and this is an edge punch. You can get these from leather suppliers, and somebody like Rocky Mountain Leather, Tandy Leather, Springfield Leather, one of those. All I can recommend on this is don't sacrifice price for quality. A lot of times if you get these from Amazon, maybe some not so reputable places, the first time you hit the shaft it'll bend. So just make sure that you go ahead and get one that's going to last you a while. So now that this shape is in, I can go ahead and stitch around that without any problems. I am going to start, put one extra clip in here, just kind of hold this. I'm going to start down here on this edge because this is the edge that's going to get folded under and have a clasp or a buckle on it. So I'm not so worried about back stitching here. It'll be hidden. to go ahead and stitch around my edge, and I am going to just take some hand cranks here. Stitch up the other side. So now this strap is completed. You see I've got that nice curved edge there. If you would like to put some base coat and edge coat on that, you can certainly do that. From here we're going to take our keepers, and I forgot to mention our keepers in the beginning when I was going over pattern pieces. So make sure you cut, these are 2 pieces that are cut by measurements. You draw a line down the center. And just to let you know, the keepers are these pieces right here that hold the strap in place. Okay, holds the strap down, prevents it from flapping. So we're going to put a little bit of double-sided tape over the line here. Do that on both pieces. And then we're going to fold the long edges in. Now, in this situation, we want the long edges to touch. We do not want to leave a space. And these are little. Okay. You don't want them real big and bulky. Okay, so now that those edges are folded in, we are going to top stitch down each edge. We have our 2 keepers completed. So let's go ahead and put this strap together. You're going to need your roller buckle and take your small strap piece. Now you are going to need some kind of punch for this. You can do a hand punch with a mallet and just a little punch that you hold, or you can use a leather punch like the one I have here. But you're going to want to go ahead and measure up, use your silver marking pen to mark the spots, and you're going to put a mark in the center. Now, we're putting the roller buckle on this edge, so at this point we just need to put 1 mark, and then we'll punch for our rivets, or you can stitch. Like I said, you don't have to use rivets to put this together. I'm going to go ahead and put 1 hole, go all the way through, and then put your buckle on. And I always have to think about how to do this. Let's see. The buckle is going to go tongue will go through the hole and the roller buckle part will be on the top. Okay, so the tongue on these is slightly angled, and you just want to make sure that's at the top. And then again, you can stitch or you can put a rivet. And just because I usually don't stitch, let's stitch this time. Now, before we stitch, we need to go ahead and put one of our keepers in here. So the keeper is going to go basically on the back side of this tuck here. We want it to be here at the top so that the strap can go through and it's going to join underneath. Okay? Now, you can join this in a couple different ways. You can use a little bit of super glue and then just do a little hand stitch, or you can rivet it in place. I like to use little tiny rivets, and I'll show you how I do that. But before you decide how large you want it to be, you need to make sure that the strap is going to fit through. Okay, and it does. So I just want to make sure that I know how much overlap I need, so I'm going to look to see what that overlap is, and then make sure that it fits through. And you want it to be tight, okay? You don't want it to be so tight you can't get it through, but you want it to be tight enough that it's going to hold it in place without having it fall out. So I can see that that overlap for me is, and you can measure it, roughly, there's my ruler. Okay, so that is right about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and punch a little hole, 3/8 of an inch, with a 3/8 of an inch overlap here. I'm going to put a small rivet in here. Okay, when you place the rivet, go ahead and put it through. Put the back side on. And then this won't fit in a rivet press. So what I do, these little rivet setting tools you can get on Amazon or at some sewing shops. Just go ahead and place the rivet in that little hole. These have got, see how you've got a divot in there? That's where the head of the rivet goes. This part also has a little indentation there. You're going to put that right on top, and then you're going to hit it with a mallet. Okay, now that rivet's set. So slide this on. Of course, the rivet part's going to be in the back. I'm going to slide this so that the okay, and see how we capture that in the back? I'm just going to stitch right along this edge. I'm going to do 2 lines of stitching so that it's nice and tight and I don't have to worry about it coming apart. That's one. Do one more. So basically I'm putting about 1/8 of an inch apart from each other. So now we have the keeper inside of that loop. We need to go ahead and set the rivet on the other keeper because we need to slide it onto this small section before we put our O-ring on. So I know I need about 1/4 of an inch overlap. I'm going to just repeat the same process. Now, if you do not want to do a belt, if you'd rather just do webbing with an adjustable strap, you can certainly do that. This is a part here that you definitely are going to need rivets though, if you want to do keepers or make keepers. Slide this keeper onto the strap. Go ahead and grab one of your O-rings, and you can go ahead and stitch this as well. I'm going to do 2 lines of stitching again. So we have this lower strap done. And now for the longer strap, all we have to do is on one side go ahead and put the other spring gate O-ring. And I give you measurements if you'd like to put a rivet, but I'm just going to go ahead and stitch. And do 2 lines of stitching. So there we have the connector on one side, and then on the other side all we have to do is punch holes so that the belt can, the roller buckle can go through. So when you punch the holes, make sure that you start 2 inches from the edge. Don't start too close. So you're going to want to center, mark a hole, and then I suggest every 1.5 inches after that, but you can make this as adjustable as you'd like. So you could do every 2 inches, every 1 inch, 3 inches, I mean, whatever works. And I'm going to put, you usually want to put 5 or 6 holes, although if you need it smaller, you can certainly put more. You want to make these holes a little larger than a typical rivet hole, and of course go all the way through. I'm just making sure that they're centered really well. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and put that through, put it through the keeper, the second keeper, and now you have a nice belt buckle done. And then we have our O-rings on the other side that will connect to the bag. Okay, so let's move on to step 2, and that's going to be doing all of our closure and flaps and getting all these pieces together. So we have 3 pieces that we rough cut. We cut larger than what we needed. So you can either use glue here, maybe some Fabri-Tac, Beacon Fabri-Tac, you can certainly do that, or you can use some double-sided tape. Now on the closure piece, this lower closure piece, we do need to go ahead and mark where to put our twist part of our buckle. So when I cut this out, I have a line, the pattern of the design of the fabric, there's lines in it, and I use that line to my advantage. I want to make sure that I line this up directly on that line, and that's where I put my twist lock. It's going to be nice and even and lined up. And even though this is going to be on the bottom, I still want to make sure that I make it as nice as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and punch a hole here on this dot so that I can mark with a silver marking pen. Or some kind of fabric pen on that dot. Okay. So this is going to be, again, the twist part of your twist lock. So grab that piece. Okay, so this is going to be the base part. Go ahead and mark that, even with those dots. And then you also want to take a piece of Peltex Deckable Heavy, some kind of stabilizer, and we're going to do the marks on this as well. There's no stabilizer on this piece, but you do want to stabilize where the lock is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple marks on my stabilizer. You could fuse the stabilizer onto this piece if you'd like. I'm just going to slide it on. So I'm going to cut holes in that. And then I'll cut holes in my main part of my fabric. And then before I put this on, the last thing I want to do is trace the pattern piece onto this, because once you put this on, it's going to be really hard to trace that piece. So I'm going to line up my holes, make sure that this looks nice and straight. And then go ahead and trace this out. It's going to make life a lot easier. So go ahead and put the twist lock piece on. Slide the stabilizer on. And bend the prongs down. Okay, so now place some double-sided tape along the back. And I like to put the double-sided tape over the back of the prongs. That's just going to help, number one, hold the piece or hold the hardware on. And then it's going to protect the second piece from rubbing. So take your double-sided tape off of the piece, and we're going to put these wrong sides together. Oops, look what I forgot. Hold on, forgot the washer. Take that off. Okay, put the washer on and then put these down. Okay, much better. Now let's put the double-sided tape on. Now this is 1-inch double-sided tape that I get from Waywack, but you could certainly use thinner tape. You don't have to get 1 inch. All right, now we're going to put these wrong sides together. And again, you can use glue even. You don't have to use double-sided tape. Okay, so that's the first piece. I'm gonna set that aside. Go ahead and take, this is for your upper closure. Let's go ahead and put some double-sided tape on this as well. While we've got it out, let's go ahead and put it on the flat pieces as well. And these are simple enough. We're just going to peel the backing off the tape and place them wrong sides together. Okay, take your pattern pieces and go ahead and trace them out. So I'm going to lay it down. I am going to make sure that the line, whatever you want centered, is exactly correct before I start tracing. And also make sure it's straight. Now, one of the testers used piping on their flap. So basically what they did was, instead of doing this wrong sides together, they decided to do right sides together, add the flap or add the piping into the flap, and it gave it a really nice look. Okay, so there's our flap. And then do the same thing with the upper closure piece. Now we do have a marking here for our twist lock placement. I'm going to go ahead and mark it, but I'm not going to put the twist lock on here yet because I want to make sure I get the bag together and it's going to line up okay. When push comes to shove and I get all this together, I may want to move this up or down a little bit depending on how thick the bag ends up being. I mean, I know that these marks are correct for the pattern, but sometimes our seam allowances are a little bit bigger or smaller than what we intend, and it's better to wait to make that final cut. So from here, we're just going to stitch these. Now, you're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch inside this line that you drew. And then these cutting lines, or these lines we drew, are going to be our cutting lines. Now this upper closure piece is the one that's right on the front of the bag, so I'm not going to back stitch. I'm going to pull the threads through to the back and tie them off. Pull these threads through. And tie them off. And I'm going to burn those edges. Just this is going to be on the back side. So I'm just going to melt that thread. And now using a sharp pair of scissors, I'm going to cut around this edge, or you can use rotary cutter and ruler, either way. All right, I'm going to repeat the stitch on these pieces and then I'll cut everything. Now the flap, you can backstitch, and on this piece you can backstitch as well. This is going to be on the very back of your bag, so if you backstitch here, it's going to be right back here. You're probably not really going to be able to tell, so I don't worry too much about that piece. And the flap is on the inside, so when you open this up, your flap, if you start back here and you backstitch back here, it's not going to be near as noticeable because it's on the inside. Okay? We do have a curve here, so I'm going to do a few hand stitches. Flap is sewn, so let's do this lower piece, lower closure. It is far enough away that you do not need a zipper foot, but if you feel like you'd rather be safe than sorry, you can go ahead and put one on. So all the pieces are sewn. I'm going to go ahead and take these over to my table and using a rotary cutter and a ruler, cut the straight edges, and then I'm going to use scissors to cut around these curves. Okay, so all the pieces are completed. If you would like to put some base coat and edge paint on these, now's the time to go ahead and do it because we'll be using them again here starting in a few more steps. Okay, we're going to set these aside. So go ahead and let's start with the gusset pieces. So we have two pieces. We have a main piece and we have a lining piece. We're going to put those right sides together and we're going to clip or wonder clip these edges. Now the lining is shorter, so go ahead and meet these edges. You're going to have to pull it slightly to do so. So we have something that looks like this. Go ahead and stitch. And then we're going to turn and go ahead and lay our gusset down. Now, when you center this gusset, you're going to see that you're going to have a little bit of the front of the bag showing on the back, and we want that. We do not want lining peeking out. So I'm going to first clip these edges. And then I'm also going to put a few clips down the gusset. We're going to top stitch the edges, and then we're going to baste the rest of the gusset closed. So I'm going to do this from the right side. Now, as I go down these long sides, I'm just using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, in the gusset, we want to put a little pleat on these short edges. So clip the gusset right now. It's going to be right sides together. And then we're going to stitch just using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And we're going to stitch down right at roughly 2 inches, but you can go between 1.5 inches and 2 inches. I'll do right here. Just going to make a small mark. And this is a very small pleat. So I'm starting at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance at the top edge of this gusset, and I'm stitching to nothing at that mark I made. Okay, so it's just a tiny little pleat. That's the pleat. I'm going to go ahead and find the center of this gusset while I've got it. And we are going to set this aside for just a minute. We need to do our credit card slots next. So grab your credit card slot pieces. And you can glue, or you can use some double-sided tape on the back of your main credit card slot piece. I'm just going to put a couple pieces down the center. And this is just going to be to hold the lining in place until we can get it stitched on. I am also going to put one piece at the very, very top, because we're going to fold that edge over. All right, peel the backing off the center pieces. And lay your lining on top. And then fold, peel the backing off the top. We want to fold this over about a 1/2 inch. Sorry, I got double-sided tape stuck to me. All right, there we go. Okay, and we're going to top stitch. If you have any lining peeking out, like I happen to do, you should not, but obviously I did not put that on very well. Go ahead and cut it off. Just going to trim a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so that is how we do the credit card slot. Simple, pretty easy there. So we're going to move on to the back, which is step 4. The first thing we're going to do is to put our zipper pocket together. Now you can either wonder clip or use double-sided tape to get the zipper on. I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape here. Just peel the backing off and lay the zipper so that the wrong side of the zipper is on the right side of the pocket. We're going to stitch. And then you want to open up this seam allowance so the zipper tape is laying flat, and we're going to top stitch that down. Connect the wrong side of the zipper, so we're going to be working with the other side now. I'm going to put it against the right side of the pocket piece and repeat the process. Make sure your pockets line up. So you're putting the zipper on top, and then you're also making sure that the sides of your pockets line up. And we're going to top stitch the zipper tape flat. From here, you can go ahead and add your zipper pull. Burn those threads. You can either use a zipper jig for this, or you can try to freehand it. Sometimes I think I can freehand it, and then oh, that one worked out well. Okay, so place some double-sided tape on the edge of the zipper tape. And take the back piece with the zipper cut or zipper opening. You're going to peel the backing off the tape. And depending on which way you want your zipper to close, I want mine closing to the left. Go ahead and center this in. Adjust if you need to, which I always have to. Okay, now we're going to stitch right around the opening. Make sure your pocket's open, okay? So have it open in the back. And we're just going to stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I need to do one more stitch, or at least a 1/2 a stitch. And I want to start and stop in the same hole. Pull these threads through to the back. And we're going to tie these off. And I'm just going to singe that edge. All right, take the upper pocket and fold it down to the lower. Go ahead and clip. And cut off the excess of the bottom pocket. And then we are going to stitch around the open sides. So flip this so that it's right side up. You're going to pull this back so you can expose the side of the pocket, and you're going to stitch down, around, and up the other side. And I do have forgot to mention, I did change back to my brown thread. And you really want to get as close as you can to the seam here, meaning the edge of the zipper here at this point, because you don't want the zipper, we have to cut it back, we don't want it to be in the seam allowance. So from here, go ahead and cut back any excess. You really want to make this about 1/8 of an inch on both sides. Okay, so there is that pocket completed. Caught a little bit of that in the bottom. Now we need to go back to all of our connector pieces here. So we need to put this top piece, the upper closure on the flap. And if you can see how my logo, my bag tag name fits perfectly right in that area. So if yours is small enough that you can do that, that's a great place for it. So before I go any further, I'm going to install that right here in the center. Now, one thing I have found is that when I do this, I end up having to use my zipper foot to sew this piece on. So just kind of be aware of that. You may have to improvise a little bit if you do put it on there. So I'm just going to cut a tiny little hole here. A lot of you ask where I get these, and I get them from an Etsy shop called Metal Things Art. Last time I checked though, they weren't selling on Etsy, and I don't know if it's temporary or if it's, I think sometimes she goes on vacation and takes her shop down. So just check Etsy out, Metal Things Art. All right. So from here, we're going to put some double-sided tape on the back of this piece and stick it on the flap. Now, as far as positioning, you want, obviously, it to be centered on the flap. And you're going to measure up, give you some measurements in the pattern. You're going to measure up and draw a line, and then you're going to put the top of the piece against that line. Okay. And for some reason that looks a little high to me. I think on this, I have you measure from the top of the flap. Yeah. All right. So follow the measurements in the pattern. Go ahead and place that on. Okay, now what we're going to do to stitch this on is we are going to follow our previous stitch line where we top stitched. So stitch in the same stitches. You're going to go up, around, down, and then right where your 1/8 of an inch seam allowances on your flap, that's where you're going to do the bottom stitch here. Okay, so I'm going to switch out to my zipper foot so I can get that sewn on. I have my zipper foot on, but again, if you don't have a bag tag you're putting there, you probably are not going to have to switch out on your zipper foot. I'm just going to start in this upper corner here and stitch across, down, over. I am going to, because I'm using a coordinating thread, I am going to back stitch a little bit on this just to hold it down, because if I pull the threads to the back and tie them off and burn them, you're going to see that. So there's really no good way to do it and hide the stitches, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the back stitch. So I'm going to start in the same hole up here and then come across. As I approach the other side, I'm going to make sure that I'm in the same turning hole. And then right where the top stitching is on the flap, and turn, make sure that I pick up right along the stitch line, and then just do a tiny little back stitch. So from the back, here's the stitching. And then from the front, I'm in the same holes as the original. So now we need to go ahead and put the flap and the credit card holders on. Now the main thing you need to remember is to get your pocket out of the way. The reason why we do it in this sequence is because once you put that flap on, the zipper is going to be really hard to top stitch. So just go ahead, and if you feel better with it, just clip your pocket out of the way to make sure you don't accidentally stitch on it. And the first thing we want to do is put our credit card slots on. Now you want to be centered, obviously. Let me just find the center of this piece. It's going to be easier to do it this way. I'm just going to put a mark with a silver marking pen here. And then I do give you a measurement as to how far away to stay from the bottom edge for those credit cards. Go ahead and hold these in place with some double-sided tape, or you can use some magnets, some of these So Tight magnets, which I love. We do have a code available where you can get a discount on these. We have that link below. All right, make sure that I'm not crooked. And the first thing I want to do is stitch around the sides. So I'm going to sides and bottom, step one. Let me go ahead and put my main foot back on. And let me tell you that switching out these feet doesn't take long. So if you are in a situation where you're thinking, oh, maybe I need to switch my foot out, but maybe it'll be okay, just switch it. It just takes a second. See, easy peasy. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stitch. Move my magnet out of the way. Watch out when you put those magnets back together because they're really strong. They'll pinch you. Ask me how I know. Okay, so now from here you want to find the center of your credit card slots. Now I have marked the center already, so I'm just going to draw my line. And then we want to start at the bottom, stitch up, and then turn around and stitch down the exact same line. So from here, I'm just going to turn all the way around. That's what it looks like from the back. Here we have the front. Go ahead and just double check. Good to go. And they are large enough that you can put more than one in. And I did it on purpose because, you know, a lot of times when you travel, you have your license, a couple credit cards. I had my medical card with me, and so it's better to have even, I mean, you really only need 2 as long as you can fit them, you know, fit plenty in, which you can here. All right, now on the pattern piece, on the back pattern piece, I have a marking for you for the flap placement. Okay. You can use that, or you can measure and just draw the line, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to, from here, measure down, draw a line, and then I'm going to clip my pocket back up. I just put it down so that I wouldn't have any tucks in there. And now what you want to do is take some double-sided tape and put it on the top right side of your flap. Okay, peel the backing off the tape. And you're going to place the flap right sides together with the back. And you're going to put it right above the line, and of course centered on the piece. You don't have a lot of room side to side, so it's really easy to center it. You can see, you know, there's just a little bit of space, and I'm putting it right above that line. So now I'm going to stitch 2 rows of stitching, 1 at 1/8 of an inch, which is basically going to be over this top stitching line, and the second at 1/4 inch. All right, that's the 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch. So to give you an idea of what we look at from the back, we've got our credit card slot sewn on, and we have our 2 lines of stitching for our flap. Okay. So we can unclip our pocket, kind of fold this flap down, and set this aside for just a minute. All right, we're going to take our other back piece, and we need to attach our bottom closure to it. Now, of course, we want it centered, and you want to measure up from the bottom. And again, I give you a measurement on that. So go ahead and mark it. Oops. And then put some double-sided tape on the wrong side of the lower closure. Now, the main thing on this piece is you don't want to sew all the way to the edge of your back piece, because we still need to do the back seam, and we do not want to catch this closure in that back seam. So I'm going to peel the backing off the tape. I'm going to lay it right against that line. And then I want to make sure that I'm at least a 1/2 inch away from the bottom of the bag here when I sew. So if you want, you can go ahead and measure and draw a line. We're going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you want to give yourself a little extra room, you could actually do 3/8, excuse me, 3/4. And we're going to do just like we did at the top. We're just so the top closure on. We're going to use the same stitch lines and go all the way around. So that's what it looks like from the back. And then we have our front done. It's actually the back, but you know what I mean. The front of the back. All right, so now we need to put these two back pieces together. So I'm going to put some double-sided tape along the top here. Now, you can use glue. You do not have to use double-sided tape. And you don't even have to use that. You can just clip. I just feel like that holds it all in place for me a little bit better as I stitch. I'm going to put a little bit down the sides as well and across this back. Okay, so before I peel this off, I want to tell you what we're going to do. Okay, this part here, I'm sure you have figured out by now, is going to be our strap connectors. Okay, so eventually these are going to fold back and we're going to stitch or rivet, either way. So we need to place these two pieces wrong sides together to form our back. The most important place that we want to match are these corners here, because we are going to, with this construction method, we are going to clip over here by the flap, and we're going to be stitching the front right sides together with this part here. And we can, if this top is not exactly matched up, that's okay, because we can trim it. We're going to use a generous 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to trim it down to 1/8 of an inch to get all these seams nice and even. But it's going to be really difficult to match and to trim that particular spot on that side and on the other side. So that's our matching point right there. Okay. So I'm going to peel the backing off the tape of this top piece, at least part way. And I'm going to match that point and then do my best to match the rest of this strap. Okay. Put a little clip right there to help me hold it. Take the rest of the tape off, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to make sure that that point right there is matched up perfectly. Put a clip. And then I can kind of finagle the rest of this into place. Okay, and then I'll peel the double-sided tape, or backing off the double-sided tape on the bottom half, and go ahead and lay that down. And then, of course, as we do the rest of this, we want to make sure that the curves match as best as possible. In the bottom. And I'm going to put some clips as well. Okay, so here's what we have. So now I'm going to stitch all this together, and I'm going to use a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around these curves, and then, as I mentioned, a generous 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, basically from where the flap folds over up to this point, over and across. We can trim this back a little bit, but we can't trim it back a lot. So just be generous with your seam allowance there. I see right in here, I'm not matched up almost like hardly at all. Let me see if I can just cheat that a little bit. Don't know that I can. Just adjust slightly. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stitch across the top first, again using a generous 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a generous 1/8 of an inch on these sides. And then right in this area is where I'm going to start making sure that I come down to the 1/8. Now, when you get to this point, don't forget to move your lower closure out of the way. I have my double-sided tape came down a little bit far on that, so I'm going to try to just peel that back. There we go. Zipper pull out of the way. And I did do a little back stitch there, you saw. This is going to fold to the back, be against my body, so if there's a little back stitch, nobody will know, unless they get way too close. Okay, so now essentially we have our back, our entire back completed. All right, I'm going to pocket. Now I'm going to go to the table and I'm going to cut back this top seam. You can see, like right in here, I've got a little bit of the back. You know, the seams just didn't match up exactly right. I mean, it's almost impossible to get them exactly right. So I'm going to trim back. You can see a little bit right here as well. Just kind of barely trim this back to this point. Trim this, trim around. And if it needs to trim over here, I will. And stop trimming right about where the flap ends. Okay, right about here. We want to trim it for a couple reasons. One, because we want it to look nice, but also if you want to put some base coat and edge paint on there, you're going to need a nice even edge. Okay, so I'm going to go do that and then we'll move on. All my edges are trimmed. And now that's ready for base coat and edge paint, if that's something you'd like to do. Okay, from here we want to make small snips, about a quarter of an inch below the flap on the edge of the bag. And we're going to make a snip about a quarter of an inch. Now, once you do this, if you cut into your seam, it's not so worrisome down here at the bottom, but we certainly don't want the seam to come apart this way. So you may have to go back and just do a little back stitch over your stitch here. Because this part could be edge coated, this part we're going to sew into a seam. So about 1/4 of an inch, I'm coming about 1/4 of an inch in. And I am clipping through my stitches, so I'm just going to do a little back stitch right there on that one stitch. Just don't want that coming apart. And that's all it takes, is just a small little stitch. And we are going to set this aside for just a minute while we work on the front. So the front pieces, we have a lining and we have a main piece. We're going to put them right sides together and we're going to stitch across the top. This is a 1/4 inch seam allowance that we just stitched. All right, from here we want to fold the lining over so that it is right sides together, or excuse me, wrong sides together with the main piece, and we want a little bit of the main piece showing at the top. So I'm going to clip. Okay, so you can see there's just a little bit, just enough so that when we look at it this way, the lining's not peeking through. And I'm going to stitch across the top with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to baste the rest of this close. Now, you're going to see down here that the lining's peeking out a little bit. That's okay. I'm going to stitch from the right side so I can just stitch where I know I'm catching both, and then I'll just trim that lining off. The reason why that lining's doing that is because we folded this slightly to the back. So that's why we've got that little bit of an edge sticking out there. So I'm just going to trim this little bit off wherever I see lining. And there's my front. So go ahead and find the center. And now we're going to take that gusset and we're going to take the front and we're going to clip them right sides together. So match up the centers first. Put some clips on the bottom. And then line up the side, top edge. Now as we clip around, we're going to see that our gusset looks like it's too small. It's not fitting great around the curves, and it's supposed to do that. We need to make small relief cuts in the gusset to get it to fit properly. So I'm just doing little 1/8 of an inch clips. In the gusset, you always want to clip the straight edge. Okay, and then go ahead and clip that in. We're going to do the same thing on this side. And then when you do it, those little clips you make open up. See how that's opening up right there? And that's what is allowing this to fit around the curve. All right, so from here, we want to go ahead and stitch this together. Now you're using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance when you stitch this together, okay? Take it slow around the curves and just adjust as you go so you don't have any tucks. The smaller the seam allowance that you take around curves, the better. The less chance you're going to have of having tucks. So that's the reason why we use 1/4 of an inch here. So go ahead and check it out and make sure that it all looks good. And that you don't have any tucks. All right, looks fantastic. I am going to put a few more clips in here, just to help those corners sit a little better. Okay. And if you would like, you can even clip a little bit, but remember, we're getting ready to put binding on here. So you don't want to cut these edges back too much, because now you're going to be, when you go to sew the binding on, you're going to be coming into your gusset more, and you don't want that to happen because you might get tucks. But what I want to do is to even up any edges. So you can see here how it looks like my gusset was not super even right there with my main part of my bag. You can see a little bit of my main part. I'm just going to clip that main part off because I want them to be even. I want everything to be even all the way around. So I'm just checking it out. It's like right in here, I could trim a little off. Okay, that looks really good in there. See both sides. Now take your binding and just take the binding piece that you have. You just kind of leave about 1 inch on each side and roughly measure. Now, binding is honestly not my favorite thing. However, it makes for a wonderful lining. You don't have any saggy or bulky linings. I guess bulky is the right word. And it really, nobody sees your binding. I mean, not even you. Once you get everything in your bag, these are in the corners, it's all pushed in, you don't see it. My secret weapon to binding is to use black. Black thread, black binding, even on colored fabrics, you know, colored linings. This is a bias binding. You really want to make sure you use a bias binding because the bias binding will stretch a little bit, where if you've got a straight binding, it won't do that. And since you have curves you're going around, you really want bias. This is pre-made binding that I get from Amazon or wherever your favorite place to get binding is. And what I want to do is just flip the top edge over just about 1/2 inch. And then fold this back. Now you can take this to the iron and you can iron that down. I'm just gonna kind of do a little finger press here. And I'm going to take this binding and just put it right around the seam we sewed. Okay, put a little clip there. And I'm just gonna continue clipping. Now what you want to do is around these curves, you want to slightly tug on your binding to get it to curve around there nicely. And you really want the curve or the fold of the binding to be right on the edge of the fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of slightly pull this, get it nice and tight. I'm tugging just a little bit, keep that nice and tight, and then when you get to your other edge, go ahead and clip off until you have about 1/2 inch. Fold that under, and go ahead and clip it. Okay. So I'm going to switch to black thread, and then we're going to come back and we're going to sew this binding on. Okay, I have black thread in the top and in the bobbin, and we're going to stitch. And there we have the binding on. If there's a spot where you didn't catch underneath, just go ahead and stitch it again. Don't take anything apart. Just go from the back and stitch over it so that you know you caught it, okay? So everything looks fantastic. We can move on to the final step and attach our front. So we want to attach this right sides together. And so what that means is this essentially is the right side of the back. So we're going to first match our center seams. And then you want to attach the top of the front here, burn my threads, to that clip we made. Okay, so essentially that's the top of this back. So I'm going to clip there. And then clip down the rest of the way. Now, just like on the front, the gusset isn't going to fit, or it's going to look like it's not going to fit, and we're going to need to clip the gusset to make it fit. So once you make those clips, you can go ahead and pull this out. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Go ahead and there's our edge there. We're going to clip the top of that to the top of this edge. And then snip our gusset so that it fits. And I'm just making small, roughly 1/8 of an inch snips here because we're only going to be taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so don't make them too deep. Okay, so here we have it. And now we want to stitch this in place. Now, an awl or a pair of hemostats, something like that is going to come in handy when stitching this. So again, a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And we're just going to stop at the point where our snip is. Okay, don't stitch past that snip there. So we have that stitched on, and you want to go ahead and cut back any places where it's not even. So I have a spot right here. Make sure the seam allowances are exactly even. And now we're going to put the second piece of binding on. We're going to do exactly the same way as we did the first. This one little thread here. So take the binding, you're going to fold it over about a 1/2 inch. Place it on the top edge. I'm going to clip it around, tugging on it slightly to get around the curves. And if you find that looks like it's not going to cover the stitching, it means your seam allowance is probably too big, and just cut that back a little bit. Pull around the edges. And I say pull, you don't want to pull tight, you just want to give it a snug. I'm going to clip this off and then fold it down and over. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stitch this binding on. I'm going to change my thread to black, and then we'll get stitching. So I was just inspecting my binding. It looks like right here it kind of came untucked a little bit. I'm just going to kind of try to, it's sewn. Just pulled away a little bit. I'm just going to, since that's a raw edge, just clip that so it's not sticking out. Okay. To go. So now we get to turn it, and turning is super simple. All right, so from here we need to go ahead and install our clasp, and from the other side of our twist lock. And from what I can see, this is going to match up perfectly. So I'm just going to take this over to my cutting station and use one of my shape cutters to cut out this shape, and then go ahead and install the other side of my swivel clasp. So the twist lock is installed. It's going to take the flap a little bit, you just got to kind of train it down, and it will eventually get to a point where it stays down most of the time. It just takes a little bit of time for that to happen. So once you leave it closed, you could even just put something that weighs a little bit on the top part of this flap, and that will help it. All right, so all we have left to do is to put the connectors on, and we will be done. Isn't it cute? All right, so from here, you can do a couple of things. You can stitch this on, or you can rivet. Because I always do rivets, we're going to stitch this time, but you can certainly do either one. I'm going to take the O-rings, or the gate rings here, off of the strap. It's going to be easier to do this without them. And I do give you measurements in the pattern if you would like to use rivets. So just follow those measurements for your dots, for your rivets. Since we're not going to do that, I'm just going to fold this over. And what you want is a little bit of the strap connector to be on, let's see, you don't want this to be folded all the way to the edge, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because the gate ring needs a little bit of room on the right side, okay? So just put your gate ring on and fold it back, and you'll see where the gate ring ends is you're gonna have about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to clip it. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You'll see how the gate ring kind of dictates. And if you don't use a gate ring here, if you use an O-ring or something else, you will see that it will kind of help you determine where that needs to be. Okay, so now for ease of sewing, I'm going to take these out. And what I'm going to do is stitch on my top stitching line right where the intersecting corner is. I'm going to stitch down. So right here where this point is, I'm going to stitch basically right there. So you see I leave some room to put that gate ring in. And then I'm going to stitch across. I don't want to hit my zipper, okay? I don't want to stitch on the same line as my zipper. I want to stitch a bit above that. And really, I want to stitch to the, well, actually it is about where the zipper is when I fold this back. Remember that this part is going to be against your body, okay? So you don't really have to worry about as much about how it looks here on the back as you do on the front. So let's stitch down to this point. We're going to stitch across to where the zipper stitching is, stitch on top of that, and then we will come up right here, which is about where the back intersects. So we'll just stitch a square. And I need to change my thread because I do have black in. We certainly do not want that. So I'll go ahead and stitch it. I'll mark my other one and then we'll go ahead and stitch all this together. So based on the back side of this strap is where I've marked these squares. And we're going to go ahead and stitch these on. Now, again, my preferred method is rivets, but they are not 100% necessary. And that's kind of what I want to show you here. I am going to try to keep things lined up. And then I'm going to do a little back stitch up here. So there's the back, there's the front. I should be able to get this in. Just like that. So we're going to repeat on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to go wipe my marks off, we'll attach the belt, and then we'll take a look. So here we are, the completed Sorella. So you see me wear it as a hip bag. There, you can certainly wear it as a crossbody, and if you want it longer, if you want the strap longer, you can do that as well. As you know, that these gate rings are great because you can switch the strap out. You could have a bag that maybe you have some webbing strap, maybe you have a belt strap, and you can just change it out however you'd like. So it has a lot of versatility. A lot of my testers did different things where they did the flap a different color. Some did the back different than the front and the flap. I mean, they just used all kinds of neat and creative things. So make sure you check out the tester section of the pattern for inspiration. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.